The 100th annual general meeting of BMW AG, that, dear shareholders, says a lot about your company. It is strong and robust, adaptable and innovative. It takes a stance and acts accordingly in a responsible manner. That is how BMW has shaped mobility over the decades. What else does it take? Values we live by and respect. Solidarity in good times and in bad. A constructive relationship between management and employee representatives. This is what makes BMW. The 100th annual general meeting. It also says something about you, our shareholders. You take a long-term view, just like us. You give us support and stability. You enable us to be bold and look to the future. That is how we at BMW are able to purposefully chart our own course. So let me start by saying thank you on behalf of the Board of Management and all our associates worldwide. I would like to combine the thank you with a warm welcome to all our shareholders. The 100th BMW Annual General Meeting is also the first in our history to be held virtually. I see this positively as well. In this way, we can share information with you and answer your questions without putting your health at risk. Particularly in the current situation, you want to know what steps are we taking. Postponing this event was not an option for us. Of course, I would prefer to stand before you in person today, looking into your eyes instead of looking into a camera. We all, during the coronavirus pandemic, have realized how much we need personal contact, not just with our families, but also our friends, colleagues, and social groups. And even though we are using digital options now more than ever, BMW has always been a joint project. When we are successful, it is thanks to many people. You as shareholders, our employees and their families, our suppliers, also, of course, our retailers, and also always society. BMW is a partner of cities and communities in all countries where we operate in. We call this a stakeholder approach that is lived, and that has always served us well. 2019 as a financial year was not easy. In April, the European Commission provided us with a statement of objections relating to its antitrust allegations. In the first quarter of 2019, we made a provision of almost 1.4 billion euros for this purpose. Nevertheless, we did meet our adjusted targets for 2019. We sold more vehicles than ever before, over 2.5 million BMW, Mini and Rolls-Royce cars, and over 175,000 BMW motorcycles. This represents a 9th consecutive all-time sales high, and I would like to express my sincere thanks to all our customers worldwide. You are already familiar with our financial figures from 2019. Group revenues of over 100 billion euros, group earnings before tax of more than 7 billion euros, significantly lower than the previous year. The EBIT margin of 4.9% in the automotive sector was within our adjusted target range. Without the effect of the provision, the margin would have been 6.4%. We invested over 6 billion euros in research and development. Today, we are proposing a dividend of €2.50 per share of common stock and €2.50 €2.52 per share of preferred stock. In the current situation, a lot of people are asking, is it even appropriate to pay out a dividend? How is this compatible with paying short-time allowance? And we have naturally given this a lot of thought. In March, around 20,000 employees at our German plants were working short-time hours. In April, there were just over 30,000. The short-time allowance is paid from contributions made towards unemployment insurance, which is funded in equal parts by employers and employees. This secures jobs during times of crisis. First, we had to exhaust our many flexibility options, including systematically using up overtime hours and asking employees to take leave. We are topping up the short-time allowance to up to 93% in line with our agreement with the German Works Council. The dividend is clearly a way of sharing the company's success with you, our shareholders, and this happens retroactively for the prior financial year. Anyone who buys BMW shares is investing for the long term, and we consider it a privilege to be able to make business decisions with a long-term view. And that is because you, our shareholders, stand by us, like you are today, during the coronavirus pandemic. Your company can be relied on, and the same applies to our dividend policy. Let us not forget that our employee profit sharing is also tied to the dividend, and that our employees achieved great things in 2019 is something that I'm convinced of. Many of our active and former employees would have normally joined us today in the Olympic Hall in Munich. I would like to take this opportunity to say how much I respect and appreciate what our employees have achieved. Thank you for your hard work and dedication last year. At the same time, this recognition comes with an expectation. Now is the time to mobilize all our forces. 2020 will be extremely challenging, but we remain optimistic. We have learned from experience throughout our history. We have always faced up to challenges and shown that BMW can handle a crisis. And even more so, upheavals have often enabled us to create new beginnings. In every crisis, we have to set the course for the next chapter in our company's history. That is how we also turn a crisis into progress. Several examples prove this. For instance, at the legendary annual general meeting on the 9th of December 1959, BMW was on the verge of being taken over by Daimler. Then, entrepreneur Herbert Quandt stepped in and offered us a future. With the revival of the new class, BMW went on to change mobility and become profitable. Another example, in the early 1970s and in the midst of the oil crisis, we opened our plant in Dingolfing. Next year, 2021, there, our highly innovative iNext will roll off the production line there. Or during the 2008-2009 global economic and financial crisis, we launched our e-mobility initiative. Everything required for climate protection today, our BMW i3 has offered since 2013. It is the only car with a sustainable 360-degree approach from supply chain to recycling. At BMW, we've always considered the future perspective, and that is something I would like to talk about today. First, we are relying on flexibility and sound judgment to guide your company through the coronavirus pandemic. And second, we're continuing to invest in our successful future whilst being a responsible corporate citizen in our actions. Let's turn to the first topic. I took over as chairman of the board of management 9 months ago, and today hardly anything is the same as it was in August 2019. The coronavirus has shown how vulnerable our globalized world is. In mid-March, we issued an outlook for the full year of 2020, giving a prognosis that is something that the capital markets appreciated. At that point in time, we assumed the world's car markets would normalize within a few weeks. In the first quarter of 2020, despite the pandemic, we performed relatively well. Group revenues and earnings before tax were slightly higher than the previous year even. However, this was mainly due to the base effect from the provision I referred to earlier on. As you know, the BMW Group sells vehicles in more than 150 countries. And as COVID-19 spread around the globe from east to west, our retail outlets closed one after the other, producing a domino effect. At the beginning of March, the sale of cars was only restricted in China and parts of Asia. But as early as mid-April, sales had completely ground to a halt in virtually all of Europe, in Central and South America, Russia, South Africa, India, and parts of Asia. In countries like the United States and Canada, sales were also restricted. The only retailers open were in Korea, Japan, Australia, and once again in China. Since earlier this month, May, customers in many European countries and most of North America have been able to visit the showrooms again. Even while they were closed, our dealers stayed in close contact with their customers. They've been video conferencing with customers to advise them and configuring vehicles together online. This is already possible in more than 60 countries. We have digitalized our sales processes and made significant investments in conjunction with our retail outlets. And this is now bearing fruit. We are also increasingly able to offer contactless vehicle sales. Here also, I would like to say a big thank you to all our dealers worldwide for their flexibility and the creativity over the past few weeks. Thank you very much for that. The progression of the lockdown, however, is also reflected in BMW and many sales figures. In the first quarter, we saw a minus of around 21% compared with the first quarter of 2019, most noticeably in China. In the month of April, sales went down by 41%. This time, the impact was felt most in Europe. In many countries, politicians are now easing restrictions, and particularly here in Germany, a lot of people think things have already bottomed out and the worst is over. But unfortunately, this general perception does not reflect the actual situation. The full economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic on our business will be felt in the second quarter, especially in key markets like Europe and the United States. The forecast for 2020, ladies and gentlemen, looks bleak. There is no other way to describe that. The IMF projects that the global economy will shrink by 3%. There has been nothing like this since the Great Depression. In Europe, the European Commission expects the Eurozone economy to contract by 7.7%. The outlook for 2021 remains extremely uncertain. The biggest problem in the current situation is that supply and demand are collapsing at the same time. That didn't even happen during the economic and financial crisis 2008-2009. Governments and central banks are offering substantial financial support and stimulus packages that should at least mitigate the economic damage. Having the right exit strategy will be important for all economies, because the length of the lockdown will ultimately determine the cumulative loss of output and demand. There is at least a glimmer of hope coming from China. After a record 2019, our sales dropped by 88% in February 2020. But as early as in April, we already delivered nearly 14% more vehicles to customers than in April of 2019. And we know from our Chinese customers that consumption there will quickly bounce back, thanks to pent-up demand. In addition to that, there are also only 170 vehicles for every 1,000 people there. Unfortunately, our biggest single market is only of limited use as a blueprint for development in other markets. In Europe, the economies in Europe have been affected to varying degrees by the pandemic, for instance. Demand for cars in countries like Spain, Italy and the UK will probably be very slow to recover. The same applies to the United States. Experts agree there will be no rapid recovery and that the coronavirus pandemic will influence the global economy for months or even longer. And we at BMW have always steered the group according to demand, and a few days ago, for this reason, we adjusted some aspects of our outlook for the full year of 2020. As expected, group sales and group earnings before tax will be significantly lower than the previous year. The EBIT margin in the automotive segment will now be within the range of 0 and 3%. What is our priority right now? The best restart possible for your company. This is how my board of management team and I are approaching the situation. We're adopting a realistic view, taking actions that are controlled but highly consistent, and switching course quickly when circumstances change. This applies to all three phases of dealing with the coronavirus pandemic: lockdown, reopening, and the gradual return to normal business. In phase 1, we protected our employees worldwide. That had the highest priority, while at all times maintaining our operational capabilities. And therefore, we always kept the BMW Group running. In production, we continued to implement everything that was urgently needed. In non-production areas, many people worked from home. In phase 2, we began and will continue with a structured, phased ramp-up of our global production network.